In 2008, California rock band Weezer released their third self-titled album, The Red Album. Track 3 of that record is a nostalgic journey down a music-filled memory lane of the upbringing and formative years of frontman Rivers Cuomo in a ballad called Heart Songs. The lyrics culminate in his own experience of turning all of the musical influences of his life into his own opportunity to write, record, and perform music that went on to impact and inspire others. This podcast, similarly, traces the impact of music as it has highlighted and even inspired the life experiences of its guests. My name is Adam Blaylock. Welcome to Heart Songs, the podcast. This week on Heart Songs, the podcast, we have a media professional, a former journalist, and current host of Foos Files, a Foo Fighters podcast. Please enjoy Dan Harrison.
Gordon Lightfoot sang a song about a boat that sank in the lake at the break of the morning. A cat named Steven.
Hi everyone, my name's Dan Harrison. I'm a media professional from Birmingham in the United Kingdom, and I'm the host and producer of Foos Files, which is an independent podcast for fans of the Foo Fighters. Now, spoiler alert, I've not actually picked any Foo Fighters songs in my selections for this, but I was delighted to be asked by Adam to come on Heart Songs, and I think it's a really cool format, and I've certainly had to think long and hard about my choices for this. So my first pick, a song that reminds me of my childhood, is probably not what people who know me might expect. The first music I remember hearing when I was young is stuff that my dad used to play, like the Beatles, the Kinks, Van Morrison, a bit of Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan, a lot of Paul McCartney's solo albums, such as the Flaming Pie record and Flowers in the Dirt. But an artist that really sticks out, which is a bit more from left field, is an Irish folk singer called Christy Moore. Now, I grew up with quite a few kids from school who came from Irish Catholic families. I don't have any Irish blood in me myself, but I remember in school anyway, there was this Christy Moore tape being passed around between the parents called Live at the Point, which is a live recording of a show of his in Dublin. And my parents had a copy of this tape too, which they used to play in the car a lot. One of the songs on there was a cover of Fairy Tale of New York, which is of course by the Pogues featuring Kirsty MacColl.
Got on the lucky one, came in at 18 to 1. I've got a feeling this year's for me and you. Happy Christmas. Oh, I love you, baby. There's gonna be good times when all our dreams come true. They got cars big as bars, they got rivers of gold, but the wind blows right through you, it's no place for the old. When I first took your hand on a cold Christmas Eve, oh, I told you that Broadway was waiting for me. You were handsome and pretty, queen of New York City. When the band finished playing, the crowd howled for more. Sinatra was swinging, and all the crowd they were singing. Oh, we kissed in the corner and danced round the floor. And the boys from the New York Police Choir were singing Galway Bay. And the bells were ringing out on Christmas Day.
I didn't know that at the time, and despite the lyrical references, it didn't necessarily resonate with me that it was a Christmas song from hearing that Christy Moore version. I'd have been 8 or 9 at the time, I think, and I guess you don't pay attention to lyrics quite as deeply as you do when you get older. But not only is it a really nice version of the song, Christy Moore's stage chat and banter and preamble as he leads into the songs is really entertaining and quite humorous. He tells daft stories, he curses a lot, and that sort of stuff really grabs your attention and sticks with you when you're that age. And then further down the line, as I broaden my musical horizons a bit, it provided me with a gateway into the genius of Shane MacGowan and the Pogues. Obviously, Fairy Tale of New York is considered one of the best, if not the best, Christmas songs of all time. So when December rolls around every year and it's on the radio all the time and it's been played in the shops, I do think back to that Christy Moore version from my childhood. And then on top of that as well, with my parents, back around that time, we had a really memorable Irish road trip holiday. So that album, Live at the Point, always makes me think back to that trip too.
These are the songs I keep singing. Quiet Riot got me started with the banging of my head. Iron Maiden, Judas Priest and Slayer taught me how.
Track number 2, a song that you discovered when you figured out what genre of music you like. Well, for me, it was always about guitar music on one level, whether it be the artists I mentioned earlier that my dad used to play when I was younger. But then when I started to discover my own tastes, there was an era called Britpop that was sweeping through British culture in the mid-1990s. So that was the likes of Oasis, Blur, Pulp, Suede, Supergrass, and all these great guitar bands that came along, and they were absolutely on fire. They were dominating not just the charts, but as I said earlier, popular culture in general here in the UK. It was a great time. Probably the biggest explosion of music and popular culture colliding since the 60s. But the thing with Britpop and that scene was, it was all over in about 3 years between 1994 and 97. It kind of came and it went in a flash. I was still really young. I was 12 by the time the party was over, so to speak. So I was kind of too young to enjoy it in a way. So then there's a bit of a lull, really, in good rock or guitar music until you fast forward a few years to the early 2000s and a band from New York City called The Strokes came along, and that for me changed the game completely. I remember there being a lot of hype about The Strokes in the music press, and then one day I was flicking through the music channels, I think it was MTV2, and there was a performance video of their song The Modern Age. And you just couldn't take your eyes or ears off them. I was like, wow. It had this chugging Velvet Underground style guitar driving the song. They all look super, super cool. Julian Casablancas is just so captivating. I think in that particular version, he ends up rolling around on the floor, but still manages to sing the song perfectly. And I was like, that's it. This is what a rock and roll band should look and sound like. I mean, most of the great rock and roll bands have a distinctive look as well as having great songs, and the Strokes had that in abundance. In fact, I went through a phase of growing my hair and wearing a leather jacket, trying to be like the Strokes, and thinking back to it now, I looked absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, the album Is This It came out in 2001, so I would have been about 16, and I absolutely played it to death for a good 18 months or so.
These are the songs I keep singing. Back in 1991, I wasn't having any fun till my roommate said, come on and put a brand new record on. Had a baby on.
So that leads me into my third song choice. I'd figured out what I loved musically, and I was at the age where my mates and I were starting to go to watch bands a lot. I'd become an avid reader of the music press that was around at the time. I would buy NME, New Musical Express, which was the big weekly music magazine at the time here in the UK, every Wednesday without fail to read about the latest bands. And it was my dream for some time that I was going to write for one of these magazines like NME or Q or Rolling Stone. I knew I wanted to go into media, and I'd got this vision that I was going to be a music journalist, a bit like the kid in the film Almost Famous, except I never got to hang out on tour with Kate Hudson, unfortunately. But I started to write pieces for my own amusement, and then one day, I can't remember how I found out about it or how it came about, but I approached an independent music website called Designer Punk, kind of like a fanzine type thing, and said, "Can I write some reviews and articles for you?" And the editor replied and said yes. It wasn't a money maker, it was completely free of charge, a hobby, but it was a chance to get my stuff published at a young age, and as a bonus, I'd occasionally get sent some new releases, like some 4-track EPs and demos on CD. One of the first albums I reviewed was Take Them On Your Own, which was the second album by the Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. And it's the first one I showed to a few friends and family, and they went, "Do you know what? You're quite good at this." So for my next choice, I'm going to pick Stop by Black Rebel Motorcycle Club from the album Take Them On Your Own. So the final choice, my heart song, so to speak, this one was really difficult. But through my dad, I inherited a love of Bruce Springsteen, and there's so much that you could say about his music and his lyrics. You could just talk about them forever. But the song I always come back to is No Surrender from the Born in the USA album. Because of the line in particular, we learn more from a 3-minute record, baby, than we ever learned in school. And that's because it's just so true. It makes me think about how prevalent music has been in my life in terms of not just shaping me as a person, but also in educating me too about stories and places and people. And then also thinking about friendships and how so many of those are intertwined with music, and memories and experiences relating to music too. It just makes me feel really sentimental and nostalgic. So yeah, on an emotional and creative level, I guess, that's the song that I will always go back to.
Thank you for joining us for Heart Songs, the podcast. If you'd like to be considered to be a guest in a future episode, please email the podcast at heartsongsthepodcast@gmail.com. See you next time.